Speaking of the spectrum, I'm so excited to bring this to everybody. My name is Shahrukh Sultan. I'm currently the vice president of an awesome organization called the Autism Society in the Greater Hudson region. We'll talk more about who we are and what we do. But for the podcast, I want to talk about why we're bringing this to you. So the reason I wanted to go with a name like Speaking of the Spectrum is because the autism spectrum is a very wide range of spectrum, right? There's no one size fits all. There's no silver bullet, unfortunately. And it's not even just about the individuals who have autism, right? I feel like it's almost like multidimensional because the folks who have autism, right? There's many people associated with that. There's the parents, there's the caregivers, there's the services. So it's almost like a four-dimensional spectrum when you look at it, right? I myself am a parent of a child with autism. My oldest son, who is now 12, is nonverbal. Beautiful child, unfortunately can't speak, but we're making a lot of progress. And those kind of things led me to this Autism Society, joining it. And then I met somebody like my co-host, who I'll introduce in just a second. We encouraged each other to maybe have a talk about it. And we talking more and more and more. And every time I talk, I learn. And anytime I learn, I have more to talk about. So that multidimensional keeps spreading. And I figured, why not have a podcast? So here we are. The organization themselves, Autism Society, Greater Hudson region, is one of the oldest affiliates of the national-wide organization. We've been around for, I think, over 30 years or something. What we do for the area is we do a lot of coaching. We do a lot of information and referral. So if you have families out there who don't know how to get started, you just realize your child has autism, you don't know what the first step is or the next step is. Unlike most diseases, you will at least go to a doctor. They'll tell you a prescription. It's hard to find that service, and there's funding issues and all that. So the society, you give them a call. We help you kind of guide through that process. For someone like my wife and I, we kind of had to learn a lot of it ourselves, but then we learned about the society. They kind of held our hand a little bit and got us to the next stages. So that's one of the things we do. We do a lot of programs out there to help, kids and individuals acclimate themselves to society. I will be talking more about that to the podcast. But before further ado, drum roll, please. I'm going to introduce my very special guest, not guest, my host, co-host. Guests are coming later. His name is Joe Templin. If that name doesn't resonate, would you learn it? Because this man advertises himself as a Swiss Army knife. But every time, Joe, I look at your credentials, there's like another Swiss Army knife within that Swiss Army knife has popped up. I think everything from like being an ultra marathon runner to the next Mr. Miyagi or something. Like, I'm going to let you introduce yourself from here. Go, Joe.
So I am the human Kaizen expert. And human Kaizen is the mindset of continuous personal improvement for individuals and organizations. And it's very much related to when we were little kids, when we were 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. We saw somebody riding a bike, so we learned to ride a bike. We saw somebody walking, so we learned to walk. We saw mom getting a cookie off of the top shelf,
right.
So we pulled out the drawers and pushed the chairs over, and we climbed up there to get that. And so we were in a process of continuous learning and growth. And normally somewhere in our teenage years, we stop that. So human Kaizen is all around that. So whether it's my martial arts, whether it's the writing, whether it's the learning, the studying of psychology, these are all components to help me make me better and to in turn try and help make others. And a lot of my growth has come in the past 7 years since my youngest was diagnosed being on the spectrum.
Okay.
My oldest is on the spectrum also. So I have 3 kids, 2 of which are on the spectrum, one who is neuronormal, but he's actually my biggest headache.
I like how you put neuronormal in quotes because, again, it's a spectrum, right? Like,
yep.
Different versions of it, yeah.
And one of the things that you actually missed when you were talking about, that the 4 components a moment ago of the people on the spectrum, there's also the siblings around this.
Yeah.
So if you have a special kid and you have a quote unquote normal kid, the normal kid has to adjust their life for their brother or sister because there are different needs placed upon them that a family without somebody on the spectrum would not normally have. And so they grow up in a little bit different environment overall too. And so one of the big things about the Autism Society of the Greater Hudson region is that we give people community. We give them a chance to talk to others, other parents, other siblings, other professionals that are exposed to similar ideas. to people who have been there, done that in a lot of ways. So when we have that bad day, because we all have a bad day at some point with our special guy or special girl, that how do we get through it without completely losing it?
Right. And that sense of community gives so much like strength because I've experienced that firsthand. I mean, some of the events we have like our 5Ks or our galas, and even if you're not, even if you don't have a child or someone who you're directly related to that's on the spectrum, and you go there as what I like to call an ally, right? It just brings so much support. Like one of the things that my wife and I kind of, grew out here in this community was that if we get invited to a dinner, like we know our son's going to be uncomfortable if there's too much noise, there's too many people, whatever. So a lot of my friends have been really, really great about this. Is like they give me a call up and they're like, listen, if you're coming, we'll do these accommodations for you. And guess what? My son has a great time. Like that completely flipped the experience of how we've sort of grown in the community and socially and made things easier for my son to deal with. And then when you're talking about, the sibling, right? So our younger one is still a toddler. He's like 5 or 6 years old, right? And he has to grow up understanding why does my brother not speak, or why is he not playing with me, or something. But he's really learned to grow around that. And there are times when we're out getting food or something. He's like, "Hey, why didn't we get something for my brother? Can't forget about him." Which is, I'm like, it's clicked on him. He gets it, right? And then I feel like that builds empathy as a character too. If you have a sibling growing up like that, and as a parent, like it's your job to like really be on top of it for your kid. Right. But then coming back to the sense of community is like when we went to that, I know we hosted like a Christmas community event a few months ago. Right. It was the holidays. And I brought my young kid out too. And he actually had more fun than my older son because he had to run back in the car. But my younger kid was like, hey, these kids are great. They're so nice and sweet and everything. And he was talking to Santa and handing out gifts and everything. So, I mean, that for me is like infusing in him at an early age. Because I feel like autism in many ways is like almost like the future of like maybe human beings are evolving in some way. I don't know, right? But I feel as a community, we're only as strong as our. I'm not going to say weakest because I'm not going to say autistic people are weak in any way. But I'm saying as the people that need the most help or assistance, right? So if you can build a community around that, that community is going to be that much stronger, right? And go ahead.
And well, one of the things about it evolving in that direction. I mean, the statistics that came out last year were like 1 in 33, 1 in 34,
36,
136 now. 25 years ago, that was 1 out of 154.
A few years ago, it was 1 in 55.
Yeah. So it's getting more and more, and we're seeing more adult diagnoses around this. And I've been around it forever because for our listeners who don't know me yet, my background is I was an applied physicist. I'm a graduate of RPI. Go Red. And
see, Swiss Army knife keeps expanding every time we talk.
So, it being a physicist, if you've ever watched Big Bang Theory, Sheldon, yes, is probably on the spectrum.
Yeah.
But individuals on the spectrum are overrepresented in STEM because we naturally gravitate towards that. It is a chance to solve problems. And physicists were the worst of the group. So literally, even 25 years ago when I was in graduate school, I would say that at least a third of the people in my graduate program were somewhere on the spectrum as I look back now, knowing what to look for.
When you say worst, you mean very loosely, right?
Yes. Worst, best, was good, was bad. It's in the eye of the beholder.
Right, true. So speaking of people like that, we will be featuring on the show, we'll try to bring in each week someone who I'd like to call an autism hero, right? Someone who's either doing something for the community or is themselves on the spectrum who's done something really special. And we'll be featuring them soon. But before I get into that, I want to shout out a quick thank you to our sponsors, Pulse MD, our good friends there who are sponsoring this podcast for us, keeping us on air, bringing this to you. So if you're in the Hudson region, they have about 7 or 8 locations all over Dutchess County, Hudson, Poughkeepsie. They even opened up one in Florida, which is pretty cool. I'm pretty sure that's his retirement plan in works. But hey, he's doing good work. So if you ever, God forbid, need a kind of medical need, they have state-of-the-art material. Go check them out, Pulse MD.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. So you were talking about stats about how 1 in 36 kids now has autism. In a lot of settings, even at my job right now, professionally, I'm like a project manager and like legal discovery and stuff. But on the side, we've set up a little group for like families with or people who have families with someone in autism or something. And we meet every few weeks or so and talk about this is a little support group. And every once a year in Autism Awareness Month, which is in April, we have sort of a virtual coffee chat, right? And over there, this one time I went on, and there was many people who are just our allies, right? Who don't themselves are directly connected with somebody with autism, but they came on, and I said that stat that hey, it's 1 in 36, and I was like, let's do a little exercise here, right? Everybody, who has a child, raise your hand. Everybody who knows somebody who has a child, raise your hand. Right, that number group pretty much is everybody in the room. And I was like, there's 50 people in the room. More than half of you, 36, likely are directly connected with some child who has autism. Everyone's like, whoa, right? It's more prevalent than you think. So the degrees of separation between you and somebody who has autism is shrinking and shrinking, whether it's because of it's I don't know, some form of evolution. I'm not the scientist here, or whether it's just more awareness, which I think really truly think it is. It's just more people becoming aware of it. And like G.A. Joe said, knows half the battle, right? Like you, the more you know about it, the more you can do, which comes back to why we wanted to do this show. There's so much to talk about, so much to learn, and that's why we're here. One of the things I learned as part of being in the Autism Society, and this fact blew my mind, is that children are with autism. Like, what's the number one cause of death of children with autism? Right? You would think it's, I don't know, getting lost or something,
or like running in front of a car, because very often they run out of situations.
It's really none of that. It's drowning in water. Children with autism are 160 times more likely to drown than typical children in water, because water attracts them. It's a if maybe the soothing effect on their bodies. Maybe they finally get to be stretched at their like non-gravitational like way in the water or whatever. Children with autism are naturally drawn towards water. So that's a staggering fact. But again, the more you know, the more you can combat it. And what the Autism Society Greater Hudson region started was our swim program. It's called Sensible Swimming. And what they do is we set up at a local pool. You can bring it's not even for child, even it's like young adults can go there. We have trained coaches there who will, help get that individual acclimated with water, maybe teach them swimming, they'll learn. And guess what? And the next time this kid goes near water, at least the parents will know, right? At least he knows to float or tread water for a while. It's sometimes I feel the difference between like a hazardous situation, something safe, is just that little bit of knowledge is like, okay, how do I get myself surviving long enough that somebody can get help?
Right.
And that's what I think is so important. Like, we have this fact that's so staggering, and now we created a program to meet it. And boom, we've just made the world a little bit better.
Yes. And now, through the podcast and through Mary's work around that, we're getting more awareness around this. And so people, by having it on their radar screen, if they are friends of a family with an autistic child or whatever, hopefully they keep their eyes peeled a little bit, because it can happen really, really quickly. Kid goes in the water and 2 minutes later, they're gone, unfortunately. So just having that level of awareness around the dangers and the importance can hopefully save some lives, but also start continuing to change the behaviors so that we can have a greater impact on this community and beyond.
Right. And then one of the things that happens then, and I'm kind of going section to section here, but like when you have a safer place, a safer community, a safer social setup, where people with autism can do more and stretch, or people with special needs can do more, then you start seeing these people do so much more, because we already know that like autistic people see the world and numbers and math and things a different way, and it's not just even technical. A lot of it's physical. Like maybe they like repetitive motion, right? It's swimming or running or what have you. And by the way, folks, you're going to see a lot of parallels to running, because Joe and I are both fans of the sport. I may not look it. He really looks at this guy's an ultra marathon runner. The first time I met Joe, by the way, funny story, I didn't even know it was Joe. He was in a duck costume, high-fiving me at the end of the Autism Society 5K. And I later learned this guy had just come off of finishing an ultra marathon. Like
I did an ultra marathon the day before.
Yeah, that's right. And then you also ran recently with the Ability Experience, right?
Yes.
Talk to me about that a little bit more.
So I'm a brother of Pi Kappa Phi. Shout out to Alpha Tau and the Castle. So Pi Kappa Phi is a men's fraternity, social fraternity. We've got about 200 chapters across the country. But our national charity was originally Push America, people understanding the severely handicapped, that became play units for severely handicapped. Now it's the Ability Experience, but our mission's still the same, helping people with physical and mental disabilities in terms of development enjoy life, and particularly around sport. So in, September, I did my first race with the Ability Experience as an ambassador. And so I helped push an enabled athlete in a wheelchair for 10 kilometers at the Round the Crown in Charlotte. And next year, I'm hoping to do the Marine Corps half marathon with it. So we had a team of, I think we had 4 enabled athletes, 2 of which were on the spectrum for that particular race.
Oh, wow.
And it gives these individuals who can't do it on their own the push, literally, pun
Yeah.
intended, to help them so that they can experience what it's like to cross that finish line to the cheering crowds and everything.
Yeah.
And so the ability experience and the Push America before that has always been around empathy. It's always been around training. It's always been around awareness and embracing those individuals who are not on the same level in all situations as those of us who are able-bodied or able-minded. And so we want to give them the best opportunities to experience these things. So that's why we reach out, we do this. So we raise a ton of money for them. We do a lot of events. We do empathy and educational work, especially on college campuses, so that people are more aware of this. So this is a very parallel outreach program in a lot of ways.
That's really cool. So talking about the experience itself, now you were pushing somebody in a wheelchair
Yes.
for how long?
I only ended up pushing about 2.25 kilometers out of the 10.
Okay.
Because we had a guy who was a hardcore.
So it was almost like a relay or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a team of three brothers, alumni of Pi Kappa Phi, pushing one guy, and so we'd rotate off through it. But I mean, when we were going up this crazy hill, if you've ever driven around Charlotte, it's literally the highway and it's straight up. And so we formed a conga line almost pushing this guy up.
That's awesome. What was the finishing line like? Because I know, like, when running a race for yourself, you're like beat. You can't wait to finish that line. But when you're running for somebody else like that, like, talk to me of that emotion.
So, like, the guy that we were pushing, he had his hands up. He was cheering. He was going nuts. The crowd was going nuts for us. Yeah, and, like, so we made sure that we had all three of the pushers, like, arranged in a line behind him, pushing him, getting him across. And we actually let him go so that he crossed completely on his own.
Awesome. That's
about
wonderful.
1 second ahead of us, and know that it was not dangerous. So don't think that we were pushing a guy in a wheelchair down a hill crazily. But we just let him have that moment of experience. And then afterwards, when the entire team's there and high-fiving, and it's just all the emotions of doing a race, whether it's a 5K, 10K, marathon, what have you.
Yeah.
But it's amped up to 11.
Because it's almost compounded, right? You've now celebrated yourself and helping this individual get through.
We're celebrating that individual's success.
Right.
And that's one of the things about being in a service organization and supporting others is that when you get to do that for somebody else, it is even more valuable and more impactful to you as the support person.
Right. One of the things I really like to do is I'm a fan of the New York City Marathon. Hopefully someday I'll run it. I don't think I'm in the physical shape or I'll have that kind of luck because it's a large system where I don't have enough money, whatever. But I love to watch after the New York City Marathon ends, and I like to go on TikTok and Instagram and take a look at people's finishing lines, right? And I come across all kinds of people who come from all walks of life, all across the world, and what they've done. And one of the things that really struck me was someone, this is going to be my hero of the day, by the name of Kaylee Williamson, who finished the New York City Marathon last year. She has Down syndrome. She's actually the first person with Down syndrome to finish the Austin Marathon in 2022, and because of which now February 20th is officially Kaylee Williamson Day in Austin, Texas.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Right? Like, I mean, here I am thinking, like, can I train for this? Am I worth it or not? It's just like, then Kaylee goes on and kicks, ass.
Your excuse is invalid.
Right? Like, it's like, this is invalid. Like, this is amazing. And this is the kind of people I'd love to meet and hear more about and talk about. Not only that, she ran the Boston Marathon, which, you actually have to qualify for. Yeah. So that's amazing. She's a model for Adidas. And she's written and released a children's book, which I'm probably going to go buy right after this and find out, like, read it to my kids. Because that's, Kaylee, if you get a hold of this podcast and you're listening, let me know. I mean, I'm going to let you know we're your biggest fan right now. So thank you so much for everything you do.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kaylee.
One of the things we're going to be doing also on this podcast, right, is what we're going to call the Adam Project. And
that sounds like a bad movie.
It's a great movie by Ryan Reynolds, because I'm a time travel fan and I'm a Ryan Reynolds fan, and it is totally hooked to get Ryan Reynolds here in the studio someday with us virtually. Who knows?
You know what? If he shows up, I want him dressed as Deadpool.
I want him dressed as Deadpool, serving us a cease and desist letter as Deadpool. I mean, nothing more crazy than that. But the Adam Project stands for Autism Dads and Moms. And that's obviously a big part of that 4D spectrum that I talked about. And what we want to do in this segment is share your personal story or talk about, if you're a parent and you're watching a podcast right now, go to a little comment section and leave us a note about, hey, what was one of the experiences or really like aha moments you had, or you had a great time or something, or a real win or even loss. Just talk to us about it. We'll mention it here. But one of the things I want to talk about, at least in our inaugural episode here, is one of the biggest thing I learned globally, right, was that over in the Middle East, because we travel to Dubai occasionally, and over there, they don't even use the word handicap, or they don't use the word autistic individual or anything. They've come up with a totally different term called people of determination. And that person of determination, people of determination, POD, you actually get like a POD card, like you would get like a handicap card. Like for instance, that was one of their big castle-like malls over there, right? And I'm going to go to the restroom, and you see the men's and women's, and you expect to see handicap ones. So there's a handicap sign, but it says people of determination. I took a picture of it. I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, right? And the reason that blows my mind is because out here in the West, right, where we like to think of ourselves as like thought leaders, right? And we're still talking about autism awareness, autism acceptance, autism openness. Like, what's the right term? They figured it out because now you're in the person's shoe. Like, think about Kaylee Williamson, right? She's a person of determination, because for her to run a marathon takes a lot of determination. For autistic individuals to do something that we take for granted takes a lot of determination, because now you're in that person's shoe. And again, I talked about like making the better the community is, the more these people have space to grow and prosper, right? So when I think about Dubai in the Middle East going with something like people of determination, that was a total mind blow for me. And that's even reflected, like if you were, and then the reason this ties into my sort of Adam project piece is that if you fly in airlines and you have an autistic kid with you, I know as a parent you're panicking. When my wife and I went to Dubai, it took us 4 or 5 months of planning just to see how our son's going to do on that flight. It's a long flight. It's 13 hours flight. But to think about it, it took me 5 months to plan for 13 hours. That's itself is a crazy fact, right? But one of the things that really helped us was we called Emirates Airlines up front and we said, hey, this is our situation. And they told us, sir, you know what, there's a code called DPNA. And that tells, whoever you're booking your ticket with, or the flight attendant, whoever, because there's a protocol, right? Like when you go to, any kind of service and you say, hey, I have this issue, they probably look it up into some kind of knowledge-based article, like what's the protocol for this, right? So if you tell them the letters DPNA, they'll know, oh, this is what it means. They can search in whatever database they have, and they're like, oh, this is the protocol I need to execute with. So when we got to, I think it was Boston Logan Airport, and we're like, hey, I called about this. They sent a security person down with a wheelchair, sat my son down, wheeled him off right through security. Within probably 10 minutes through security, we were at the check-in line. We were probably the second person to board an international flight. The other side of it, when we landed in Dubai, was crazy because that was a silent airport. Dubai's airport is known as one of the few silent airports in the world. That's basically for special needs kids. So there's no loud sounds, there's no announcements. You just have to look at the screen or your phone to know when your flight is, and there's plenty of them around. But it was such a nice, calm little entry into the country that I was like, whoa, like this is awesome. And I remember I was wheeling my son in, and this guy came up and he's like, hey, is your son okay? Anything I can get for him? We were just like, imagine landing at the JFK, it's like crazy.
Yeah, right.
Here, they're like, people like, how can I help you? I see your kid has autism, blah, blah, blah. And then even during the flight, like, there was this one flight attendant. He was awesome. Like, he kept coming up like, hey, can your son buckle his seatbelts? Because that his belts. And that's like the first safety thing. They want to make sure before takeoff and landing your seatbelt. But we're like, look, this is his situation here. I was open about it because the first thing as an autism parent, especially I feel like when you're new on this journey, you're very like defensive and maybe a little bit like hidden about it. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to be open about it. I was like, listen, my son has autism. Anything you can do to help? He's like, listen, I got it. My niece has autism or something. I know what to do here. So he sat down with my son for 5 minutes, became friends with him, even though my son really communicated. He's like, hey, what are you doing? Playing the iPad? Cool. Lo and behold, next thing you know, his seatbelt was tied. Then through 13 hours, this guy made sure my son was getting better service in first class. He brought food out first for him. He was the first kid in the cabin to get food. Anything he liked, again, he was like right on top of it. And guess what? That 13 hours flew by, pun intended, for a flight. Joe, what do you have?
So one thing that I discovered, and I got to give a shout out to my friend Dr. Jason Eichenholz about this, is the what if game. And I do a lot of corporate training for organizations. I actually presented this concept the other day for a bank that I was speaking to their kickoff meeting. But this is something that I do with my youngest, Colin, who is both ADHD and on the spectrum. And as he says, he's a mutant and autism is his superpower. And like all superpowers, there's some weaknesses that go with the power itself.
Right.
So he's got a really good grasp on things, and it doesn't hurt that, he's a comic book nerd like me. So with Colin, one of the things that we do is we play the what if game. Because if anybody's got a friend that's an engineer, they always have a mental checklist. First this, then this, then this, then this. And, having gone to engineering school, all my friends are engineers, you can just see them processing like that. And unfortunately, the real world isn't always like that because there's all these decision gates. And very often it's outside of our control. And that's when kids on the spectrum often have the meltdown, is because they've got this script of how things are supposed to go. And if it goes off script for something that is not under their control, not under their agency, that's when all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we did is we introduced the what if game. And this lets us play forward what could happen. So as an example, we were going to go out for his birthday to go to dinner. And he wanted to go to his favorite restaurant, Sunset Cafe. All right, buddy, so we're going to go to Sunset Cafe. What if it is closed that day? What's our backup plan? Okay, we're going to go to Henry's. All right. What if Henry's is closed that day? Do we need another backup plan? No, we'll just come home for dinner. All right. So we've got that first level. All right. So we're going to go to Sunset Cafe. What is it that you want to order? I'm going to have the nachos. Best nachos on the planet. Unfortunately, they're closed at this point. So
I was continue. Heartbroken, but continue.
But I know how to make them because the owners were friends. So okay, you're going to have the nachos. What if they don't have the nachos? I'm going to have the corn chowder. All right. What if they don't have that? Well, I'm going to eat your hamburger.
So it's like a waterfall search of the programming world, right? It's like branches out. Yeah.
Exactly. But this way, they have an overview of, okay, if it doesn't go exactly according to plan, there's no need to panic. We don't need to freak out. And so luckily, Sunset was open. We were able to get nachos. Everything went exactly as he wanted. And so he was incredibly happy. But he did not have to worry because he knew if X does not happen, I do Y.
Right.
And so I'm still going to be okay. I'm not going to be in danger. I'm not going to be overwhelmed. I'm going to be able to handle my frustration.
Yep.
And having that sort of situation, that sort of vision or map of what could happen and the contingency plans allows them to move forward through it. And this is one of the things I introduced to business owners in a lot of ways and other individuals. Okay, so as it says on the cover of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic.
Don't panic.
Okay, we got a plan. We got a backup plan if that doesn't work. We don't need to worry because we invested the time up front. So now we can just enjoy, and no matter which turn we're forced to take, we're going to enjoy the process.
Right. They say if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it is. And coming back to our trip to Dubai, I'm going to keep coming to this a bit, but that's what my wife and we talked about the 4 and 5 months of planning, which involved buying another iPad for him if the first iPad's battery runs out. Now, I'm told Emirates has good Wi-Fi. I don't trust that. What's my plan B? Sign into YouTube on, what's it called? YouTube Plus or something, where you can get offline access to all his favorite videos. So my wife and I were sitting for hours making sure all his favorite videos were downloaded, ready for him to go, backup plan. What about noise? What if somebody complains about his iPad noise? We're going to get him used to not one, but 2 Bluetooth headphones, battery backup, everything set up. All that planning
it's
went
almost
into
like a military operation in some ways.
It really is. It felt like boot camp
2 is
4
1,
months.
1 is none. And so you have backups of all your equipment, but you also have your contingency plan. So here's our escape route here. Here's what we can do from that position. And it does require a lot more effort up front, but it smooths things out. And once you're in the habit of doing this, you apply it into almost all areas of your life.
Exactly.
And it makes us better parents, not just for our kids on the spectrum, but for our neuronormal kids and in terms of our professions, because we are strategically thinking, because we have to make sure that our kids can navigate better.
Yeah. And again, I feel like we're coming back to what we said at the start of this episode, which was, the more you address sort of the needs of the folks who need more help, in the community, the better that communities be. So now we've learned something about planning for autism that you can go apply to work or your businesses or what have you. So I feel like for me, that's a great takeaway lesson for this episode.
You know what? Right. It's almost like we scripted it. Or
it's
something.
Almost like we scripted. If only someone thought of that. Well, thank you for listening. This has been Speaking of the Spectrum. Speak soon, like and subscribe.